Okay. So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to our special edition we're doing tonight on disaster preparation. And I have with me here Mr. Simon Shorey, a long awaited gentleman who have been trying to get on this program. And I met Simon in 2018, I believe, right after Brett hit Trinidad. And I was so desperate for help and because I was kind of devastated to the fact to see how unorganized Trinidad and Tobago was at the time when we got hit with that hurricane disaster and unprepared to respond. And I ran into Simon in Jersey City around the independence celebration, and I explained my situation. Right away, Simon was really available to assist us, and is still available after so many years to assist us, willing to come to Trinidad to assist us with disaster preparation and share his ideas on what he has done. Simon is part of Jersey City Resilience JC, right? That's the name of the organization, and they do disaster preparation, the CERT program, and they also work with the EMTs, the volunteer unit. And Simon, I want you to introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about all these different things they're doing because we definitely need the help, especially with the volunteer emergency response EMT training program. We're trying to organize people there who will volunteer and assist because we are in a desperate situation where we have inefficient ambulance service and things like that. So down the road, we could explain that. But I want to tell about the disaster uh, organization that you have in Jersey City and what you're willing to do for Trinidad and Tobago. So go ahead, my friend Simon Shorey.
All right. So, look, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. Very happy to assist. I'll tell you a little bit about myself first, and then I will hone in on the emergency response work. So, as you can probably tell from my accent, I was born in the UK. I'm Irish Brazilian, but born in the UK. And I worked there, lived there until just before the turn of the century. Then I came across to the USA, which is where I am now, and I was initially living in Manhattan, and I was there on the Upper West Side when 9/11 happened. That was an experience. And then a little bit after that, I moved across the Hudson River to Jersey City and was there at the time that Superstorm Sandy hit, which was, again, a major incident, a major urban area out of electricity and power and telephone, cell phone communication for 10 days. And I volunteered as a spontaneous responder. Previously, I'd been a business person, but I felt that there's more that I could do. And I looked around and I discovered that there was a community emergency response team that operated from Jersey City. And I trained and volunteered with that team. And the role of that team really is to be ready for when a major disaster strikes. Now, in a major area like the greater New York City area, there are amazing full-time first responders, police, fire, EMTs, paramedics, absolutely terrific. But if a major incident happens, then even those people get overwhelmed and they need more help than they have immediately available. In due course, in a few days' time, maybe a week's time, other people can fly in from other parts of the country or even other countries to assist. But for a while, people are on their own with the local resources. Now, several heads of FEMA, the main federal disaster response organization, have said, the true first responders are the people who are there. If you have something that happens and in your neighborhood and you witness it and you are fit and healthy and able to respond, very often it's somebody like you who goes over to the neighbor and says, I've just seen that huge tree was blown down and fell on your house. Are you okay? Or you go across to the elderly lady who lives just across the road, and you say, "Do you have food and water? Are you okay?" These are the people who are the first responders. If somebody's injured, it might be the person in the neighborhood who is offering first aid before other things happen. Uh, on a slightly more dramatic level, I was once involved in a street shooting in Jersey City, and a gentleman had been injured, which included 4 rounds impacting him, one of which broke his femoral artery. And as amazing as our EMTs and paramedics are, they would never have got to him in time. And he was either the most unlucky gentleman ever to have been shot in the femoral artery in his leg, in his groin, or the most fortunate, because I was there, had training not that long ago, and I was able to keep him alive until the EMTs turn up. And that, in a sense, is the role of the volunteer first responders. They keep things going until the full-time people can come in and do more. I did a lot of training, basic training and more advanced training with the emergency response team. And through that, I then went on and was asked to go and do professional work with a response team across the country, which responded to train derailments with hazmat issues, the fires in Florida, exploded chemical plant, all that sort of thing. So I've had quite a lot of experience over quite a few years. But what I would like to emphasize for you folks is that really it is the person who isn't a specialist responder, who is a teacher or an engineer or a business person or a shopkeeper, whatever. But if they get a little bit of training that is the right sort of training, and have ideally some equipment and things put to one side, then you can save lives. You will be the first responders, and you do not know when it will come. It'll come out of the blue. Another occasion, I was on a beach with a family, and a lady was surfing, and the fin of her surfboard cut her upper leg and cut her thigh wide open. And again, her femoral artery was nicked and hanging loose. And she could have died within minutes. And it took 23 minutes for the EMTs to arrive on that beachside. And things will happen right out of the blue. And it's not one of the strengths of training people up is that it isn't just the big issues like a hurricane, which you can help with, but you build up that resilience and that knowledge and the competence within the community, so that if something happens, you have people around who can help until the full-time responders come in. Is that a good point to pause? And
go ahead. You're on point. You're on point. Exactly what we're looking for, Simon. Go ahead. We're listening to you.
Okay. Well, I'm not quite sure how much you want. But pardon me. So, I mean, one of the things with getting local people to get trained up like this, which I believe is one of your key interests, is you've got to have somebody who is willing to lead it. And I don't know what your experience has been with leadership of non-profits, but if you are a leader in business or in a for-profit organization where people are paid to do what you want, even then it is not always easy. If you want to lead people who are volunteers, that's even trickier, I promise you. It's like 10 times harder. And so you've got to have somebody who is the leader of these volunteers, who truly understands that and knows how to communicate and lead, not just manage. Then you've got to have really good trainers, because you're going to be dealing with people with a wide range of expertise, and they could all be really, really good in certain areas, but not in this area. So you need to bring them together and train them. And then of the people that you have trained, some may just sort of go away and live with their families and just have greater knowledge of the future, and that's awesome. And there may be others who say, we want to do a little bit more. My personal situation is that I can do some more. And so these individuals, you can try and put together and get them to work as a coherent team. You can find the appropriate clothing and equipment, regular periodic training, refresher training, additional training, training alongside the professional full time emergency responders. I would say that one of the issues with training volunteers and having them learn these skills and be ready to function in the event of a major incident is that you need to have a good working relationship with the full time emergency responders. There is, at times in some places, an issue where the full time paid emergency responders look down on the volunteers as well. It's just somebody who wants to be a cop or somebody who wants to be a fireman or whatever. But actually, no, they're very happy being a shopkeeper. They don't want to be a fireman or they want to be a teacher, but they're happy to help in these other areas. But you need to build that bond, because if something bad happens, a lot of relationship stuff is involved. And so if Julian, the shopkeeper who's part of the volunteer team, gets things to a certain stage, Julian needs to be able to contact Bob, who is a member of the fire response unit, and if they know each other beforehand, everything goes so much more smoothly when there is actual emergency happening. So I would highly encourage all of people like that to train together in particular areas and then to actually have exercises. So, for example, some of the areas that I've done training in has been explosions or pre-hospital trauma care, all a whole range of areas, and I've been sat side by side with people who are EMTs, paramedics, police officers, fire officers, and when you sit next to them and work with them through the academic side and then through the practical side, you build up a level of mutual trust and understanding. And then when something really happens, everybody works. It's important to realize that the people who we are trying to help are having the worst days of their lives. They're having a really bad time. And they don't care whether you're paid or whether you're just a volunteer. Doesn't matter. What they want is a high quality of care. In the United States, we have volunteer firefighters in many parts of the country. And those firefighters have to be as good as a paid firefighter, because when they're going in to save somebody's life, they've got to be the very best they can be. And so it is just the same with people who are trained up as volunteer disaster responders. They need to take it seriously. It's not a knitting circle. And they need to be ready and prepare. And this again is part of reflects back on the importance of leadership, because if you're training somebody for something and they're doing it on a regular basis in the real world, then they understand how important it is. If you're training somebody for your islands and you're not going to see a major disaster except maybe once every 10 years or even longer. So maintaining that level of enthusiasm and cutting edge skill, all of that is that much harder. And so you have to have a really good team leader. And of course, does anybody got any questions?
Okay, so I'm going to give Marissa a chance to join in. Marissa, you there?
Yes.
Um,
Are you hearing
right.
me?
Yeah, I'm hearing you. So Marissa is hold on a second there. So Marissa is leading a team called Community Resilience, the
Response.
Response Deployment Team (TT), and she is
Hi, Marissa.
this team is exactly what I was looking for a very long time. So I mean, you know me how hard I've been looking at trying to get this thing going. So this is a team that's ready, they're hungry, and they just need the help. They want to get the job done just as myself. And this is why I connect with them so greatly. So Marissa, I want you to introduce the people on your team for a little bit there and tell us a little bit about your organization so that someone can understand about it.
Okay, we have Mr. Rajan Pare, who is right next to me.
How do you do so?
We also have Miss Chan Pare. She's, I think you're seeing her on the next screen.
Yeah, I'm seeing her. I'm seeing her. Yeah.
Hi guys. We have Mitra Ramnath. He's our planning coordinator.
Hi, Mitra.
And we have Sandra Gunraj. She's our chief coordinator.
Hi, Sandra.
So, Mitra, can you hear me?
Yeah, Marissa, I'm hearing you.
Okay, would you do the honors of introducing Community Response Deployment TT? Because we
Sure,
are
no
going
problem.
about, yes.
So, good night, everyone. Um,
Hi.
our organization basically falls along the lines of community resilience, um, disaster response, mitigation. So, basically, all of the things that the goodly gentleman would have spoke about earlier on, all of those things fall under our organization, and it's just basically about rebuilding one community at a time and building that capacity and getting volunteers to come out and give of themselves and their time and providing them with the necessary training to be equipped should in case our country faces a major disaster. They are now trained and able to operate and support the first responders on the ground because we in Trinidad and Tobago have realized we do not have enough first responders in case our whole country goes down. So we need well trained volunteers to support in these different areas. And then we always keep that concept of the 72-hour protocol where it is you may not see help for that first 72 hours. So it's your neighbors, your friends, your family nearby. Those are the ones to be able to assist you. So if we could give them that knowledge, information, and that training to be able to handle any of these situations. We are trying our best, and the more persons we can reach throughout the country, it is even better. We even go as far as doing site visit, looking at drainage issues, um, just the little things and even the larger things that can cause wide scale flooding, because that is one of the major things that we face here is flooding, also preparing for earthquakes, hurricanes. Most time the hurricane miss us, but we get a little licks from the feeder bands of the hurricane. So all of those are things that we want to work on and really really try to prepare as much persons as we can to respond.
One of the things that we have happening, and we have a current situation, like I mentioned, Simon. Um, Even though we have an ambulance care service, it may have an oxygen tank and a lack of training. So it's something that we need very much in that we are lacking ambulance care, the proper ambulance care. We are lacking the volunteers within the community that needs to be trained. Even the people who is supposed to be function as the official ambulance EMT is not very much trained in the way that it need to be. The service is very poor. You could take you an hour and a half to get an ambulance, so you may not get one. So, as my prime minister takes government, we're trying to restore these things, but we are so far behind that it is a matter of life and death because of the lack of availability and the lack of trained people, and the people who are supposed to be the official people are not very well trained. So one of the things that I'm driving for is to eventually get an EMT training program on the ground for the volunteers, and eventually with the government. also participating with the Ministry of Health, getting this going in an official capacity from the government end. But far as the volunteers is concerned, well, we need help for people like Marissa and her team so that we can train them to assist and give them all the necessary advice and support based on your team experience, for Trinidad and Tobago. I know you said you will go down at one point as soon as they can accommodate you. And we will work that out with Marissa and Ken and the guys there to going forward so that you can get a full stand look of what's going on and where we need to be at.
Yeah,
Go
there's
ahead, gentlemen. Yeah.
Mr. Gary,
carry on.
sorry, Mr. Simon. We in Trinidad, we dropped the ball in many places, being on the ground, and we have founded. The reason I founded this, and our team has founded this, is because we have one clear purpose, and that was turning these challenges into a solution to respond quickly and where we need support the most. And you coming here, that is going to be a very huge asset to us, because we will then work together and be able to respond quickly in emergency situations.
First of all, congratulations for doing what you're doing. The most important thing is heart, and you all have heart, and you want to help people around you day to day, and on the very worst day of their lives. And my hat is off to you. Well done for stepping up, and that's so important. Uh, when it comes to breaking it down a little bit more, obviously there are three main phases, I guess. There is preparation and trying to prepare a neighborhood or various neighborhoods in such a way so that if something bad happens, it isn't going to be as bad or as impactful as it might be. That could be, as you say, to do with making sure the drains are clear. It could be teaching families, scout groups, church groups, whatever, how to do basic first aid so that people are more resilient themselves, and how to recognize the most serious problems. So there are certain things that are within the ability of volunteer responders to do with some training without that complicated equipment. So you can do things like if there is an injury, a traumatic injury, a broken leg, or something has fallen on people, a crush injury. There is what happens if somebody's got an asthma attack. What happens if somebody has got an overdose? And there are things that you can do with Narcan or with tourniquets or various other things that you can learn, and if somebody is cool and calm in a crisis, they can save lives. We then move on to more complicated things where you're talking about injecting people and using oxygen and all of that. That's sort of the next step up. And there may be some people who have got the time and ability to do that if the funds are there. But you want to look at probably a structured approach. So the very first thing is get everybody as much as possible to do basic first aid and understand what the problems are.
Right. We are all first aid. We are certified first aiders.
Awesome.
And we also yes, and we did the AED training as well.
That's another good way to save a life. It's I wish more people were. Do you actually have plenty of AEDs? That's the next question. If you've done AED training,
we don't have any AED. They do not allow us to have the kit at home. We have it in the mall, but Mitra, would you be able to give us some highlights where we have AEDs?
So I don't believe we have AEDs in public spaces. However, like places like the hospital, the ambulance, those type of places would have, but there wasn't anything solid passed in our laws that I know of that allows us to carry AEDs in public spaces and even in our homes. So yes, we have the training to do it, but we don't have anything solid on paper from the relevant ministries.
So I can tell you that certainly in the USA, and I mean, I don't know your local law, in the USA and in the United Kingdom and various other countries, the situation with AEDs and rendering aid to people basically is that there is a Good Samaritan law. Whereas if you are acting in a reasonable way to try and help somebody, you are allowed to do it, and you're not. There's going to be not going to be any comeback on you. And the whole purpose of an AED is that it should be no more than 90 seconds away from where somebody is likely to keel over. So that means that you can walk briskly, not run, from wherever the person has fallen down and had their heart issue to where the AED is and come back again within 3 minutes. That's the golden period. So it's lovely that they have AEDs in some ambulances and hospitals, but where you really need it, you need them in malls, you need them in sports centers, probably even in schools. Children occasionally in sports will have a heart issue, but especially in malls and places like that, and they need to be prominent.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and this is where I we have to. This is why this group was founded, because this is where we drop the ball, because these are people's lives, and if we have AED,
Yes.
we will be able to save a life, because if you drop down in a mall and I have an AED or somebody who is experienced, we can use it and save that person life.
So
Yeah.
it's something that some legislation we might have to discuss with the government, guys. Dr. Ramrup will join us pretty soon. He just got home, so he's going to join us pretty soon. Um, so he would explain a little bit better on that. But it's things that we need to recommend, but we want to. There's quite a bit of things we have to put in place because this is absolutely essential. Like Simon, like how we have here someone in their private vehicle, a volunteer is fully equipped, and an emergency takes place, and they pick up the call, and they within they put their blue lights on, and they respond to the closest emergency. Right, that's how we do it here, right? In New Jersey and wherever in the United States. So these are some ideas I've been presenting to the Prime Minister. In fact, I explained to the Prime Minister before the election about what we were trying to do before, and so and I'm still in contact with her. I'm still in contact with the health minister, and these guys that are in there. So it's a matter of putting it together and making the recommendation, and then I know definitely with your help we can really get things moving forward. You know.
So, do you actually have an overarching strategic plan? What the problem is? What is the nature of the problem? What is the size of the problem? What is the location of the problem? Broken down into details. Then, having looked at both the day to day and the potential issue, if there is an overarching major disaster, and then looking at the existing full time emergency responders and
But
working out
compare,
where and how they can
considering
work.
what we are right now, we are in no position to do. No, we don't have much, to say to really get anything done. We the training is definitely needed. I think we're way
Yeah.
behind. We are way behind in equipment. So there's a lot of things because the previous government, even though we started, my prime minister started putting things in place, from 2010 to 2015, a lot of it was pushed under the carpet, kicked aside. I mean, she built a brand new hospital, and they refused to open it. So there's a lot of things, that took place. So as soon as Dr. Stephen Ramrup joins us, he will explain a lot of things because he was the former CEO of the ODPM, the Disaster Response Unit, and he's going to come and give you a little insight as soon as he's ready. But Marissa, continue.
So besides that, Mr. Simon, we also have a lot of we need emergency because where I live, I suffered a flood in 20. I've always been in growing up, see my parents struggle during floods. And in 2018, we had a flood. But in 2022, my dad returned home from New York. He came to New York because he was going through some medical stuff. So he lost his leg and he returned home. And a week after he returned, we had 5.5 feet of water in our home. And we were stranded in here. And that got him so depressed because I looked at this home that I'm in right now. This is my mom and my dad blood, sweat, and tear that they built. And it was totally destroyed in a matter of hours. After that flood, I knew my father never recovered. And he got very depressed and he passed away from a heart attack. And
Sorry for your loss.
this is what drove me to open and form this NPO. And everybody in this NPO, all my members, suffered the same loss of homes, family members, and we are still rebuilding. And we took this fire inside of us, and that is why we formed Community Response Deployment Team TT. And every one of us on this team, we have this fire in us, and we will, and I will make sure that Trinidad and Tobago, we fix these problems right now. All these disasters, flood disasters, helping people, saving lives. And this is every member in here. We have this fire in us. And thanks to you, thanks to Mr. Mahabir, thanks to Mr. Dalchan, Mr. Ramrup, and everybody on this forum for giving us this voice and now getting your help. Thank you. We just have so much gratitude towards you, and we are so grateful. And I and my team, we welcome you to Trinidad and Tobago. If you fly in tomorrow, we are all there to pick you up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marissa. Go ahead, Simon.
No, I mean it's inspiring to hear from somebody like Marissa, and you obviously have a difficult situation that has been difficult for a good period of time, and it's. I think really, as you say, I need to really hear from somebody as to what the OEM is doing at the moment and how it has it structured. But there needs to be more dynamism by the sounds of it. And well, if you have a willing set of politicians who are going into government now, then maybe there can be a change.
Okay, so I have Mr. Parry here, and he can give you an insight of more on that of the government and the politics.
So, Dr. Ramrup, who will join us shortly, hopefully, can shed some light, more light on what the ODPM or our Organization for Disaster Response can do in case of a major emergency in Trinidad and Tobago. However, as I understand it, the structure that the ODPM operates under is they don't have their own autonomy. They don't have their own machinery, equipment, or anything to actually save lives. And Dr. Ramrup is here, and he will be able to.
Yeah, Dr. Ramrup just joining us. Dr. Ramrup, you just want to introduce yourself. This is Simon on board here.
Hi guys. This is
Stephen.
Ramrup here. How things? Good.
Good
Over
evening,
here
sir.
it's a bit cold over here, so just came in from the cold.
Oh, were you in Canada?
Yes, I am in Toronto.
Oh, okay. Oh, I didn't realize you were out there.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is Simon, who I've been telling you, and there's a long time been trying to get him Simon to Trinidad, but we couldn't get the collaboration from the ODPM at the time. After Brett, Simon was introduced to many people, including remember Colonel Corrales, who was in Trinidad. Yeah, but anyway, Simon was always ready to assist us, and Dr. Ramrud, give Simon a little rundown on what we're dealing with in Trinidad at this time, and where we need to be, and maybe you just give a little synopsis of what you've been dealing with.
Well, the Trinidad is not too bad in terms of resiliency, because we have very resilient communities who one of the biggest assets that we have is we do have a very good humanitarian support network, with Rotary clubs and Red Cross, many communities, lots of groups that come up from both religious and non-religious organizations, and they come to persons who are affected by some of the impacts. The most common, as you can well imagine, is flooding. Very high frequency, high cost type hazard. But we do have a lot of tremors occasionally, so we must keep preparing for the earthquake. Some of the bigger problems we have as well is the coastal erosion with, a lot of coastal surges. And sometimes we have, with heavy rainfall, we have some landslides and landslips which affect and cut off a lot of communities. So if we look at our overall hazards, those are some of the what we call socio-natural, the South American type of jargon. In terms of our readiness, well, I haven't been involved in Trinidad's disaster management in the last 10 years under the previous government. But what they did was I don't think they followed too much of the science. They went more with the advice that they got from some of the persons who don't have too much of the contemporary evidence-based research and data coming out from like CRED and a couple of the other databases on the current disaster risk reduction science. So what happened is that they went with a more political approach using the local government, municipalities, as the disaster risk management option. And they sort of reduced the role of ODPM as a sort of central authority. And they didn't push the legislative agenda of the ODPM, which the People's Partnership, when I left in 2016, April of 2017, actually, we had tried to make that natural, that platform, that national platform for disaster risk management under the ODPM, a more legislative authority. Right now, it's just a cabinet minute that was approved in 1985 by the then Prime Minister, Patrick Manning. And when his wife was the local government minister, they created ODPM coming out of the previous NEMA. So what happened is that in the last 10 years, as I said, they decentralized the role of ODPM. And TEMA, as from Tobago, had more legislative teeth than ODPM, because under the THA legislation, the ability to coordinate and orchestrate and sort of bring all the sectors together and develop the national response framework was not on the agenda. And this caused a serious problem where, because of that field science of disaster risk management or reduction, as the case may be, what happened is that it was reflected in how they managed the disasters, where one local municipality, has its own disaster number, a call center, and it is really it's not manned by a 24-hour crew. It's manned by civilians who don't sit down there for 24/7 and answer the phone. So what you eventually have is 14 municipalities with 14 different phone numbers to call in if you have an emergency. and Tobago, of course. So it creates havoc when it comes to a multi-corporation or multi-municipality type hazard where two or three municipalities are involved, where persons are calling in from different municipalities. And even if you're traveling from one boundary to another, you have to call two numbers. So it's really chaos. And this is the big problem we have right now in terms of coordination and developing our national response framework. And national response framework, if you guys, I'm sure you guys know, is a system where you don't have to duplicate the FD, the role and competencies and responsibilities of all the relevant disciplines and sectors. In other words, then you don't have to have firemen, you don't have to have grave diggers, you don't have to have police officers, you don't have to have land search and rescue teams. You have to have an army that is properly, trained and has an emergency capability. You have to have a fire services that has resiliency and business continuity management protocols. You have to have a TN Tech that works well. You have to have a WASA that works well. You have to have a communication system that works well. So you don't have to create a new entity that has all of those persons involved. In the business sector, you have to have your chambers together. Each one of them in the critical infrastructure, they have to have their business continuity plan so that if any hazard were to occur that overwhelms the coping capacity of any of the communities, then you would have that ability, right, to respond from the relative agencies, and you don't have to have that as a separate entity with all of those players together. So I think this methodology of disaster risk management is doomed to failure because we have seen that in places like in Philippines and whatever, when the major floods occurred, where most of the civilian players were impacted by the emergency, and therefore you couldn't have a response, right, a first response, as it were, from civilians, right, in the sense that they had to see about their own issues before they could come out and deal with others. Of course, you have the 72-hour program where each community, and this is what we were talking about, we were telling the community emergency response team that we spoke to recently that they have to make sure and prepare for that, the 72-hour toolkits, get everybody trained. So what we need right now in Trinidad, one, is you need to have improved legislative authority of the central coordinating agency, which is called the ODPM. That platform has to be strengthened. The national response framework in all the public, private, and civil agencies and institutions, associations, groups, etc., they need to be strengthened in terms of resiliency or fragility, as the case may be. You have to have the communication system, which is the incident command system, right, properly reintroduced, retrained for the police, fire, right, the military, so that there's silver, gold, and bronze command. We could keep it because it's based on the old COBRA system from England. But the point is that if it works, it works. And what we need to do is to keep training them and to ensure that they are understanding that when you talk about a gold commander, you have to talk about a gold commander of police, fire, and military in terms of that 24-hour response and the ability to respond when everybody else is sleeping. That system must be working. You have to talk about the emergency operations centers and the ability to have the National Emergency Operations Center, which the United States built for me and the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the people of Trinidad and Tobago when I was there in 2012, 2013. And that facility, right, was provided by U.S. South Command, U.S. State Department. And that is a state-of-the-art building for the National Emergency Operations Center. That NEOC, as it were, is the central command of ODPM, and that communicates with the NOC. So the next part of this whole command and control system that we need much emphasis and effort in is building up that National Operations Center to be a 24-hour situational awareness center that brings all the key players in there to ensure that the eyes are there for all overt and covert hazards or threats. So that if we have to respond 3 o'clock in the morning, it wouldn't be a civilian response initially. It will be a national first responder response. As you know, the first responders are the police, fire, ambulance system, and to a certain extent the military um, under command from the chief of defense. So basically, what it is, therefore, is that the first response, and this is what right now a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of people don't understand that the first responders are these. Civilians are not expected to be first responders, right? So when the community emergency response team comes out of the rubble and they see about their own family first, then they connect with each other via proper communication tools, and then they hook up to the emergency operations centers, right, which is going to be at the municipal level, and all the EOCs of all the other sectors, for example, health, environment, public utilities, etc., etc., etc. All of those EOCs will have to stand up. So another important task is that the business continuity planning of critical infrastructure and critical services must have mission essential function, right? Functionalities up and running to a certain extent so that it is able to stand up the EOCs and connect with all the other EOCs to the National Emergency Operations Center, which connects to the National Operations Center. So that whole system, we need to re-examine it, see exactly what happened over the last 10 years. We need to strengthen it. We need to do drills. We need to retreat, right? So I
Stephen,
think
if I could ask, how well staffed and trained are the full-time emergency responders?
Well, I think the police will be the only ones that are not as trained in terms of what they would have to do when it comes to, let's say, an earthquake, which I think is the one that it will test our systems in that, because of course you can't prevent, and you can't really understand how far before, you understand me? You can't do like a hurricane where you have time to plan. So it means that if you were to test the system right now by having a massive earthquake, right, the police will be the only one that will fail to a large extent, because a lot of training that they have doesn't involve, let's say, resuscitation or search and rescue, right? So they have to really understand their role in terms of a very severe catastrophic emergency in Trinidad and Tobago, which could be either a border invasion or an asteroid or an earthquake. So the point about it
Do
is that
you have major exercises where
we have
you get maybe hundreds of people working
Yeah, we
together?
have ever so often there is a big exercise which is under the supervision of U.S. South Command and U.S. Army South with the State Department involved and a lot of the players in Trinidad and Tobago, the militaries of the Caribbean. What we have is CDMA, which is the CARICOM agency called the CARICOM Emergency Management Agency, right? The CDM, Comprehensive Disaster Management Agency, which is out of Barbados, where all the CARICOM states have signed a sort of agreement and supports it, so that CDMA actually have a very robust, right, Caribbean support, and of course in each of the countries, right, that system allows for the development of the National Emergency Operation System or Center, which is run by the national platforms, in our case, which is supposed to be ODPM. In Jamaica, it's ODPM. In St. Lucia, it's NERO and NEMA. So this system works at the CARICOM level. So what Trinidad has to do is to ensure that the NEOC/ODPM system, right, involved. So because of that, there is the training. I think, Gary, what we call that training again, where US come down every year, every 2 years, I think they come down. They do this training where they bring, a lot of the players within, and in our system, in all the NEOCs of the Caribbean, they are supposed to have a very easy facilitation, right, of foreign military, right, and under the civil military coordination guidelines of the United Nations, right? So we use the civil military coordination protocols, right, which is pushed by the military, by the UN, and that is what allows militaries to come in very seamlessly into all of the Caribbean and sit down at the NEOC. So there is a place for that, and that exists. When I left in 2016, I can't tell you if that has been drilled and it has been, it works well, but I know that we had the exercise recently, I think was last year, right, trade wind exercise, they call it the trade winds exercise. And that tests and that looks at a lot of the key players. We talked about police, fire, and our military, all the divisions of the military, the Air Guard, the Coast Guard, and of course the regiment and the First Engineer Battalion. What happens is that the ODPM, under a standing order, is able to communicate, right, 24/7 with the First Engineer Battalion, right, where we don't have to call the Chief of Defense 3 o'clock in the morning to say, well, we want to ask the major at the Kumuto to move the First Engineer Battalion out onto the field to assist with any land search and rescue, water rescue, or to assist with anything like big trucks and dinghies and amphibious vehicles, etc. Because what happened is that when I was in ODPM, through my funding, we actually bought quite a lot of those amphibious vehicles, water makers, and all this sort of thing, and we sent it to Kumuto under the supervision and maintenance of the First Engineer Battalion. So even at Demort, we had a big morgue that I bought, well, which has about 46 to, I think it's 60 refrigerated containers for cadavers, for corpses, for the deceased. So we are supposed to have those. As I said, I left in 2016, so I'm not too accurate with what is happening right now with that, but I know that quite a lot of training was done. We do have quite a lot of support, which is under military supervision at the First Engineer Battalion in Kumuto, and that if we were to have such, we would have them mobilized. They're pretty much trained. I know that they have had training exercises besides trade winds, but I can't tell you to what degree they have for contemporary new types of training, which includes a lot of AI systems and communication tools, etc. I know we have SATCOM in the sense that we are able to use, the satellite mini satellite devices, where if we do have a problem, we can send the military with these SAT devices at the EOCs, for example, the Penal Davy EOC and the Diego Martin EOC, etc. So we can use these to have communication in that hour when we try to get back our communication up to things. So there is some resiliency, but we just need to know to what extent they have developed it and maintained it.
So, Stephen, thank you so much for explaining that to me. There's so much to learn and understand. The feeling that I'm getting from the conversation that I've had with you and from your colleagues in the call here is that, there seems to be a lot of high-level preparation, equipment that has been organized, but that when it sort of filters down to the man in the street level, so to speak, there is a gap that begins to open up between what is truly needed and what can actually be serviced. If I'm being told that maybe the ambulance services, which is a fairly fundamental thing, are not that great, and that people are having training in AEDs, but there aren't any AEDs in all the places they need to be in order to take advantage of that training. And then there's other things like that. These are fairly fundamental steps that will strengthen the resilience of the community greatly. It's wonderful having the high level, the high structure stuff with engineering battalions and whatever. But if the person in the street worries they're not going to see an ambulance for 2 hours, or if somebody keels over in the mall and the person next to them has AED training, but there's no AED until the ambulance arrives, whenever that is, then there's a gap in fulfillment of some of the basic things. Chan or Marissa, do I understand that correctly, or am I missing something there?
Well, let me tell you, the answer to that is you're not totally, you don't have that, you're correct to a large extent, but we do have quite a lot of things in place that we have to explain to the team there. But I agree there's much room for improvement, right? For example, part of the national response framework, right? That is, what I'm trying. I mean, I'm sure you understand what the NRF is. I mean, the FEMA has a very good one that they have implemented in all the states. But the problem here is to manage it. And they understand it is you have to manage all aspects of that program, if you know what I mean.
Mhm.
Part of
Mhm.
that is you have to sit down with the Ministry of Health, for example, right? And you have to say, well, let me see your national pandemic influenza plan. Because, in other words, then that would have operated during COVID. So when you look at some of the indicators as an outsider, you'll realize that during COVID, they never even pulled that plan. They never even came up because I was part of the development of that plan. You understand? So your thoughts are correct in terms of how they have actually drilled down those plans, how they have put in the necessary key performance indicators, how they have measured the performance of them, and of course how they have improved those in contemporary. You have to put in new things in those plans now. AI has to come in because when we developed those plans, AI was, we didn't have AI programs, etc., communication, etc. And you are correct. One of the big indicators of resiliency in a country is the ambulance or the emergency response systems. And in our country, when I was involved in the emergency ambulance system, which was as far back as 2011 when I left 2009, we were supposed to have emergency medical technicians up to the paramedic level. Now, we only have emergency technicians up to the basic and some intermediates. I know they were training in paramedics. And then we have a legislative gap because the problem is that there are currently legislation in Trinidad that does not allow an EMT to put up a drip, no a nurse. Only midwives are allowed to put up a drip. So you cannot go, right? You cannot put an AED now at the airport, for example, and then save a guy's life, and then you cannot continue that heart beating to the hospital because nobody can reperfuse, nobody can put up a
So
drip.
what's the resistance to that? I mean,
I think
AEDs are designed in other parts of the world for
it's
literally the person in the
it's
street to use.
it's a
They
it's,
talk
it's
you through what
just,
is done.
the answer to that is that
What?
whoever is advising the politicians are not trained, and they don't understand what needs to be done. It's a problem with political intervention, not the science. In other words, then they have neglected the science. And I think that is the problem because what has happened is that you put a military guy. I'm not saying that the military is bad, but you put a retired military colonel or major, or I think, and you put him to run the ODPM for 10 years, right? The thing about it is, I have no problem. But in that organization, there were scientists whom I left there, right, who were all fired. They left, they went, and they chose the other parts. So I'm not sure who they brought back in and what sort of training, how they research, how they go and look at contemporary science, and how they understand what is currently required and how they engage. Remember, I told you that ODPM had no legislative authority. So the ODPM cannot go now and meet with the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Health, for example. We talk about ambulance as one. But remember, this is not just ambulance. This is business continuity planning is one of the key deliverables of all
Yeah.
the critical infrastructure, energy, right? Health, transport. You understand? The water, the whole water supply, the truck-borne water supply. There are many areas that don't have pipe-borne water, and they have water, of course, in pipes that have to be changed. So if any earthquake water, nobody gets in water in a lot of places. So you have to have truck-borne. So the point about it is that even during COVID, to get people to go and dig graves, if you have a mass death event, where are you putting the dead people, and who is going to get the excavators to dig the ground, and who's going to put it there? So each person, whether it's in the public, private, or civil society, there are agencies, associations that they have to bring all of them on the table. They have to go through every single responsibility that pertains to. We have to use a massive emergency like the earthquake as the one that will test all of our systems, and that will help for everything else. Obviously, the flooding, every other hazard, because the earthquake is the worst one as far as I'm concerned. That we have a statistical probability of having in this country within the next 10 to 20 years. So the point about it is that every single thing that you said, right? Of course, we had started that engagement, but from the indicators that we are seeing in the community, I totally agree with the group, with Marissa and everyone, that even the ambulance system, when I was medical director of the ambulance system in Trinidad, I was one of the medical directors. We had quality assurance meetings with the ambulance providers, which was a private provider. And we were looking at the PCR forms that were coming into the emergency department, because I was the head of the emergency department at the biggest hospital in San Fernando, 772 beds, at the biggest ER, seeing 4,000 to 6,000 people every month. I was the head of that emergency department for 10 years. So during that time, as the medical director, we checked every single PCR form. We had quality assurance meeting that looked at the length of time they came in the ER, what was the turnover rate, what was the door to needle time, etc., etc., etc. So we were doing that, but I can tell you for sure, looking at it now, if Marissa and them can tell you they're waiting 3 hours for an ambulance, we have a system status plan. The ambulance has one of the best GIS systems in the country because it's private, and you don't park an ambulance next to a facility. You have the ambulances are on system status plan, and you will know what that means. They are roving around, they parked at certain areas, but the ambulances are interchangeable. You don't have an ambulance parked at a police station just waiting for the heart attack. What you have is you have to look at the calls, and then you move the ambulances based on the calls, and this is a national thing. So this is the science of it. Although what is happening now, it is overwhelmed. And two, now, when you look at what happened when the police had the roadblock, when you had a multiple car accidents, five vehicles crash, you had a traffic gridlock. It happened before in Port of Spain when the then Prime Minister said that you had to evacuate the city for some problems that they were having, and there was a gridlock within 30 minutes because they didn't have an orderly and tested and drilled evacuation plan or egress plan for Port of Spain and San Fernando and some of our major cities. So all of these things have not been re-examined and strengthened. Just recently, one of the indicators of poor disaster risk management, but there was an explosion at a natural gas filling company in San Fernando. The explosion, some of the cylinders exploded, and the fence line communities had no communication. They didn't have any drills. They had to run themselves and form a muster point way away from the explosions. And I think up till now, my brother lives in the area. Not a single person has come back into the community and sat down with them and said, "This is our fence line plan for a gas filling company that exists now within a residential area." So when you look at those key critical indicators, when you take and look at the Point Lisas industrial estate, when you look at what is happening at Guayaguari, etc., all of those key installations that are in fence line communities close to, do they have the plans? Do they have the vaccine? And if they do, are they tested? Are they drilled? When was the last drill? We have not seen those drills. See? So the answer, you are correct. And there's a lot to be done, right, at the individual level. And this is why strengthening the resiliency of course, community resilience is the key to it. You cannot have national resilience if you don't have community resilience. It falls down. Because remember, these people have to be 72 hours, they have to survive, before the police and the fire could even bring the American military. You could reach down here in about, in about 3 to 6 hours, right? So the point about it is that, yes, if we have to get SAR teams or LSAR teams from anywhere out of the country, if we don't have enough through the CDMA system or what now, it will take a couple of days. And therefore, a lot of deaths can occur if we don't have resilient communities. I am not positive, and I am not looking at what happens when a simple flooding occurs. I mean, we don't even have voluntary or mandatory evacuation plans for flooding. Right. The point about it is right now, with all the crime that is happening, a lot of communities will not leave their homes and say, "Well, look, I'm going to a school or community center to shelter." Right? They shelter in place. Now, even if you have shelter in place, there are certain structures that can be built above the flood level, so that if they don't want to leave the homes, the military has to come in and show these people that they're going to be protecting their homes with the dinghies and whatever, while they go to the elevated structures within the community. So there are quite a lot of things that has to be done that I have not seen within the last 10 years, which we started during the period of 2011 to 2017. So basically, I'm a bit frustrated, and I'm hoping that this government kind of gets back into it and tries to strengthen a lot of the deficiencies that I can only tell you based on some of the indicators that we had put in. I mean, I don't know if you know, I'm a subject matter expert in disaster reduction, and I was sent by my government to the United Nations when we were developing the suite of indicators for the Sendai strategy. I am one of the persons
Yep.
who developed those suite of indicators for all the United Nations member states, and those, if you look at some of those indicators and you look at it now as an outer person, and keeping with what you're saying, there are quite a lot of indicators that they have not been measuring, and you can see it. I mean, it's not happening. The simple one with the 911 call center, where you have one call center and not 26 numbers, is an example of where we're going to fail. You can't have people trying to call 26 numbers. You have to have one number.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you do
I
need
agree.
24/7
Situational
how to
awareness.
say,
You have to have 24-hour situational awareness. Even the
yeah,
NOC.
where you can get a response to get somebody
Yeah,
when you call that
the
phone.
concept of I was one of the persons who was appointed by the government to sit down to develop the concept of operations for the National Operations Center. Gary Griffith was one of those persons too. Rear Admiral Kelshal was on that, right? The Chief of Defense was there, the Chief Customs and Immigration. We all were part of that team, and we developed the concept of operations and the framework for the National Operations Center. Right now, ODPM or whoever is heading the ODPM does not have an entity in NOC. So how can you bring the 26 other emergency service functions, which the NUC feeds into the NOC on a 24-hour basis? How is the NOC supposed to get in contact with the NOC, NEOC, 3 o'clock in the morning when the earthquake strikes, to mobilize the whole 26 other agencies that fall under the ODPM's National Emergency Center system? So,
Well, it certainly sounds as if you need a new team at the top with a big stiff broom to
well, we have to.
clear out old cobwebs. And
First of all, we have to get
bring
somebody.
something like-
Yeah, we have to get somebody in ODPM who knows what the hell they're doing. And then after that, the government has to understand that it is something that they have to get in place now, put in the legislation, strengthen the national response framework, and do a comprehensive analysis of all those persons who have good business continuity planning. In the public sector, right now, the biggest problem is we don't have the private sector might have more business continuity systems and programs in place than the public sector.
Interesting.
So getting back to the ambulance service at the local community level is where our team here with Marissa is focusing on and how best we can help ourselves. We have people getting shot in our local community. We have accident taking place, and a lot of times people are waiting on an ambulance, and the people within the community don't know how to assist. So this volunteer training program is something that I'm very interested in. While the government is working on its official EMT program, which is something that we intend to help with also. But we need what we can. We want to do what we can control, and the things that at our level where we can control is getting the community trained in whatever resource we can get to them, whatever education we can get to them, how best we can help to prepare them to respond.
From what I would suggest is that first of all, the primary duty of any government is the protection and health of its people, is to protect them from harm. Because if you don't have that, then it doesn't matter how well your shop is doing. If you're in dire threat of your life for one reason or another, so it's the prime duty of the government to make sure that all of this works, more so than many other things that people focus on. The next thing is that I think the local volunteers need to be empowered, and the government, yes, has lots of things that it needs to focus on, but with the volunteers, it needs to, in some ways, empower them. In other ways, just get out of the way and get some of this bureaucratic foolishness, which is, to me, is epitomized by them not being able to use an AED. This needs to get out of the way. There needs to be Good Samaritan laws if there aren't already. And there needs to be all of this stuff so that people can help each other without getting caught up in bureaucracy. And then we can look at, the training for people, and, if necessary, equipment. There should be station supplies. One of the things that is key is that emergency supplies should not be in central locations. They need to be distributed so that if something happens in an area and it gets cut off, they have a group of supplies that they can access.
Yeah,
There's all of this
that
stuff
was
can
that
be
is
done.
correct. Yeah, we have no agency, even the local municipalities who have signed MOUs, for example, or MOAs with supplies in any one of the municipalities, such as pharmacies, big hardwares. You understand? Big groceries, ice factories, for example. Ice being a very important thing in that 72 hours in terms of food, etc. So that is a problem, and the reason being is that you don't really have a disaster response entity that controls disaster risk management and manages it, because it has been allowed to fall down, in my opinion. So you're correct.
So our party recently took government, so they're trying to restructure some things. So that's the previous government disrupted. That's the one who didn't work with us. They brought everything down, and created enough problems. So we're trying to restructure things right now. So while our government is getting its act together, we are trying to get our local people assisted, because I mean, in a matter of emergency, there is no every second counts. We were running a program, Stop the Bleed. Remember, Simon, Stop the Bleed? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, so definitely we want
Uh,
to stop the bleed.
yeah. Gary, and Simon and Dr. Arnold, you know what we identified here? That there's a gap, and there's high level, low level, right? And in between, there's a big gap there that separates two of them. The high level is saturated with a lot of bureaucracy, right? So there's some level of still trying to organize and function, and go through all this bureaucratic red tape and stuff. While the low level now, and I'll give you an example. In 2018, we had a major flood, right? And we operate a soup kitchen in Port of Spain. Um, the guy who operates that is now the Minister of Justice, Devish Maharaj. He's a close friend of mine. And we feed people in Port of Spain 24/7, right? At night, basically, we provide a dinner and a drink for them. And during the flood, we mobilized 24/7, and we started to operate that kitchen, doing breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and feeding people there in some of the communities, because the first responders at the high level weren't there as of yet. So, you had that 72 hours, but remember, people cannot go without 72 hours without food and water. So we had to now deploy teams to go in there with their big pickup trucks and stuff that's elevated, some of them in tractors, and we even got like a dump truck that's high off the ground, and wade into these flood waters and distribute few food and water, right? But the army did come at some point with a boat and with their resources when they were deployed, but that took some time. This is the reason why I'm going to bring up this point is that strengthening the community, creating resilient communities that are well trained at that level to handle disasters when it happens. There's no
I
72
think
hours. There's
Ken
a 12
dropped
hour
out.
there.
Oh, never mind. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a 12-hour period there where we have to go in and assist, right? So if that could come within a well-organized community or well-trained community to handle persons who have some illnesses, who are not mobile, and their home is being submerged and stuff, this is where the training comes in, right? A broad spectrum of training from them, just healthcare, mobilizing, different training, different expertise, you know. I think it will really build resilient communities. And that is the structure and framework we need to build at the lower level or the community level. Marissa, you could probably chime in there.
Yeah, hold on a second. So, Ken is one of our civil engineers, Simon, who's going to be helping us with mitigating a lot of these flood issues. And we will update you more on that. He has a lot of design. We have made some recommendation and things like that, trying to deal with the rivers, floodgates, and different things. So, kind of what I suggested is that we start controlling the flow water from uphill. So we slow down and create those water retention where we can expand on the lake size retention ponds so that we have that overflow because we have a situation where the country's flooding 1 minute, and the next minute after the flood, nobody has people can't get water in certain areas because all the water run out in the sea. So we don't contain that water that we get, in a few months of the year. So we need to create that water storage. So Ken is going to be helping us. So a lot of these like recommendation. It depends on how much funding we can get from the government to get things done. But major things that hasn't been done that creates major flooding is the rivers under this last 10 years was not properly cleaned, and it caused all that the maintenance. But beside not expanding the holding capacity is the fact that it was not even basically maintained. So the debris was there. It was gross negligence by the previous government, so we ended up with more chaos. But Ken is going to be assisting, and we made some recommendation already on that stuff. But continue, guys.
When it comes to, I'm just thinking as this is such a deep and broad subject, but I'm thinking about each individual community. Let's take a notional community on the main island. Say it's a small town. Do we know if I was to say, as of this moment, how many days' supply of food and water for its population does that town have in stock that is sitting there?
I would want to say maybe, it would vary. But if we wanted to do an average, I would want to say maybe 2 days, 2 to 3 days.
Okay. And would that be food that is storable or food that is likely to spoil if you've lost electricity?
Um,
Non-perishable. Non-perishable.
Non-perishable.
Yes.
Yes.
Indeed, non-perishable.
Okay. I mean, there is so much that. How is the relationship between the major food suppliers and other large relevant commercial entities with this emergency response? So, for example, one of the things that we set out to do is we talk to the main managers of the food shops, of the local warehouses, of the Lowe's stores where you can go and get lumber, and all of these places, Walmart, all of these places, because if something happens, you need to go and say, what do you got? I'm in a situation here. I need to build something for whatever reason, or I need some water. What have you got in storage? Unfortunately, one of the issues now is that we went from a paradigm where in the past you'd have a lot of stuff that was stored, and then it went to straight to shop, where things didn't go into the local warehouse. They went straight to the store. And then nowadays, they even sometimes just don't even go to a back room. They go straight to the shelf and then move on. So the amount of stuff that is stored in the system in case something happens, it's got less and less over the years.
Simon, that is a very good point, and it's something that we have to exploit and look at, and maybe encourage also from the community level, right? For people to be able to sustain themselves adequately for 72 hours and even more, right? I would say in the event of a major hurricane, at least a week. Now, I want to just back up a little there, because when we have a storm, a major storm, certain communities are cut off completely. So you could have a stockpile of food and medicine and not be able to transport it to them in time because of the flood waters. You can't identify where the road is, and you need a boat, a special vessel to go in there. So we have to think about all these things, and Marissa and her team, they've been thinking about these things and they're putting it in paper, right? To invest in a boat, a small craft, to move around, to pick up people who are stranded, who are, imagine having to sit in your roof of your house to wait for emergency rescue with a watercraft, or the army to mobilize, right? First, they have to identify that there's someone there.
Do you have drone pilots? Do you have many drone pilots on the island?
So that is also something that we're looking at, right? To have persons in the community trained as drone pilots so that they can now, fly over and survey in the event of a disaster, or even if there's some sort of suspicious activity. Like, for example, we're facing with a lot of high crime in Trinidad and Tobago, right? At all levels. So that same well-organized community group can now also try to act as try to deter crime within a community by even using a drone for surveillance.
Oh, you need more than a drone. I mean, certainly, I mean, the local police nowadays should have drones. And if you've got any emergency response team, they've got to be able to put a drone up to say find out which roads are blocked. So you can go up there and say, don't go that way, go that way. You want to be able to fly over roofs and see if people have put signs on their roofs saying, please come and help me. There's so much you can do.
And certainly, and Marissa, I think we should make a note of that at some point we have to invest in a drone and have someone trained as a drone pilot.
Yes.
I don't know if
for
Marissa's
sure.
still on?
Yes, I am.
And get the license.
Yes.
So you heard what Simon just mentioned there, right?
Yes.
A drone, right, and a drone pilot or multiple persons trained to operate that drone. It is a very, very effective and essential tool for the community level there, and it also would remove the risk of having to go into the flood waters when you could fly that drone and investigate and collect data and so forth and see if persons are stranded. There can be down power lines, etc. Right, and it's easier and safer to operate a drone.
So Simon, we are looking at ways to help them raise funding too, so all these different things until we can get that. So we're looking to ways of how we can source that kind of thing for them.
I think from what I'm hearing, what needs to, and there's so many aspects to this. What we need to do is to get together an overarching document to say this is a funding package, but this is how this funding package will integrate into the greater whole. It is much easier to persuade somebody to part with their money for something like this if they can see that it's going to do something. So, for example, if you ask me to fund training in AEDs, so everybody knows how to use an AED, but then you were to say, well, actually, we don't have any AEDs and we're not allowed to use them. I probably wouldn't be paying for people to get trained in how to use an AED, because it's a waste of time unless we have the other parts put in as well. And it's the same with drones. So, for example, one of the aspects of drones, and I don't know what the laws are on the island with regard to drones, but
it's pretty
for
restrictive.
example, in the United States,
very, very restrictive. Yeah.
So one of the things that is a fairly standard one is you don't fly it beyond visual line of sight. So you have to be able to see the drone at any time. So what you need to do perhaps is to have certain people who can get a particular license on the island, which would enable them in the time of a disaster, as declared by you have to work out how that's decided, but then they get more freedom to fly their drones. So they can fly it beyond visual line of sight, because you have a camera on the drone and you can monitor that with your handset, and you fly that, or you can fly that over that hill and see what's going on there and then fly it back again. And you've got to have this responsibly, and it mustn't get in way of other operations. If your drone flies in the way of a rescue helicopter, that's a really bad thing. So you need training and you need certification, but it's such an essential tool nowadays that not to have people who are trained in this would be really hard. And I'm sure we can get funding for drones and all of that if it fits into an overall package.
No, and that is exactly the problem that we had in 2016. Biggest problem is we at the National Disaster Agency. We saw the need for it because obviously to feed back into the situational awareness system, we had to have some early warning system that will tell us, and even to tell us when we did our recce's. We had to use helicopters, of course, but at the time we wanted it, and the Civil Aviation Authority turned us down because there's national legislation that has, as far at least up to 2016, that is in place that that doesn't allow every person in this country or anyone to fly a drone without, and right now the approvals is not possible because they do not have it in the legislation. So Civil Aviation Authority is the agency, is the authority that is responsible for giving approvals. And right now, even the police have problems to get approvals for use of drones. So that legislation is weak. It has, of course, I'm subject to correction. Maybe it was in the last 10 years and I didn't see it. But that is one of the key elements in contemporary disaster risk, reduction systems that needs to be upgraded in this country. And I agree, nobody will want to fund it. If right now civil aviation is saying that nobody could fly a drone out there, you might have the pilots, but you would not get the permits to do so. You
Yeah.
see?
I just want to chime in here. Gary, you there?
Let me hear. I'm
Gary.
listening. I'm listening.
Gary, I sent you a picture with the 1% storm and the floodwater elevation related to a 1% storm. If you got time, could you just post that up for me, please? Because it's very, very important to see
Stand
the
by.
kind of disasters, and if we have the capacity to respond to those type of storms and those type of events. And I don't think so. From the high level and the low level, when you see what I'm going to be posting here, it's going to to respond to something like that. That is a monster of a storm there, a 1%. And we'll, in fact, in a few minutes, Gary will probably post that up. And I want to use an example with one of the most complex drainage basin in Trinidad called the Caroni River Basin, right? And you will see a simulation of the flooding along the low-lying areas from a 1% storm or a 1 in 100 year or 100-year storm. In some parts, you have more than 6 feet of water. Some places you probably have 10 feet of water, and the floodplain extends miles from the center line of that major river. It's cutting off highways, communities, right? And we are not trained to handle that level of storm. There you go.
So
what you're looking at here is a simulation. To the north of that photo is the Northern Range. And those are all the major tributaries flowing into that catchment, that sort of horizontal blue line there, that thick line, that's the Caroni River. And outside of that, and the big blue area there, that's the Caroni Swamp flowing into the ocean. So what you're seeing there are communities that are built up on and around the floodplain. So once they become inundated, right, it is very, very difficult to respond to that effectively. And this is why we need to train local communities. They are the first responders, and they might, in some cases, be the only responders for 72 hours, or even a couple of days, because you will be overwhelmed. We wouldn't have the capacity at the highest level to respond to all these different communities at the same time. That is a major disaster there.
You see, this is one of the many strengths of empowering local populations.
Correct.
Because it's the same in the greater New York City area, to use an example that I've worked with. If there is a major disaster, and I can tell you that I will participate in a huge training exercise called Operation Gotham Shield. And that was to simulate a response to a nuclear weapon going off on the edge of Manhattan, and how we would deal with that. Now, if you have a major disaster, you cannot hire enough full-time emergency responders all day, every day, to a level
you just
that
don't have the
able
capacity.
to
There's a capacity constraint there.
You can't hire that many people. You can't pay for it. You can't find them. So if you have that level of event, you have two things that you can do. One is you can hopefully have a pool of trained volunteers who are willing, ready, and able to assist for that initial period. And then in due course, you will get assistance coming in from other islands if they're not in big trouble, or from the US mainland or wherever coming in. But that's going to take a while. So for that initial period, you cannot have enough you won't have enough full-time responders for a once-in-a-century event. Although I think we all now know here that across the world, the 1-in-100-year floods are happening way more frequently than every 100 years.
Absolutely correct.
Whether that's in Europe or the United States or wherever. I mean, we're seeing 1-in-100-year floods happening maybe every 20 years or even faster than that.
Well, now we're seeing 1 in 1,000.
Well, and yeah, we're seeing them.
We're seeing the 1,000-year storm.
Yeah.
In North Carolina, classic example. But yeah, coming back to this type of and guys, this is just a 1% storm or a 100-year storm. We're not even talking. Let's not even talk about the 1,000-year there or the 500. Right now, when we get hit with this type of event, right, and I will say it very clearly here, we in Trinidad do not have the capacity to respond to that level of disaster, and this is why we need to bridge that gap from high level and low level, right? So that we can communicate. We have resources. People in the ground who are stranded in communities can say, "Hey, we have our response team here. We have a 5 person that need to be medevac. We are stabilizing some person here. Someone has a boat, and we're moving people around. Food is coming in, and we've come together at a higher elevation. Someone has a area where they have pulled up their property and went above the 100-year flood, and we are now mobilizing there, right? So it comes from the community will be the first responders, and they will have to be able to survive for a certain duration while help is coming. For a storm like this,
because you see, we want to make sure that they have communication equipment. We want to make sure,
correct,
we going forward, we want to look into see how we can help them raise that funding. But Dr. Amrup will help them write write out the plan of action and write the SOP.
Gary, the thing about it is that these toolkits have already been developed. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? We have the community toolkits that CDEMA has, and all member states, right, are supposed to roll out these toolkits in the communities, right? We had developed those toolkits. We had a program called Communities Organized and Ready for Emergencies. It was called CORE, C-O-R-E, right? That program was implemented in all the 14 municipalities and Tobago. CORE, Communities Organized and Ready for Emergencies. In that, right, we had brought in all the key stakeholders, including training the community emergency response teams. Right, we had the Amateur Radio Association. There were two of them, the Trinidad and Tobago Amateur Radio Association and REACT, because in the absence of drones and in the absence of at that time our Wi-Fi wasn't as much as it's now, and our smartphone population wasn't as it's now with excellent photographs, etc. So in other words, our ability for early warning systems was not as good as it is now. And we depended heavily on the Amateur Radio Associations, that is using ham radio, right, where we were able to connect back to our Emergency Operations Center and get a better picture of the emergency. And communication, as you know, is very important, because you could have all your 72-hour readiness and resiliency in all your little villages and towns and whatever. But if the needs are not communicated to the emergency operations centers at the municipal level and from there to the national level, then government cannot deploy resources. Even if foreign militaries and foreign humanitarian aid comes into the country via the airport and comes into the emergency operations center at Makoya, right? The problem is that it cannot be deployed in a strategic manner if we do not know where the resources need to go. We can't just have resources and sending it looking for where you want to throw resources, but that'll be a waste of resources and it will be a waste of time. People will die. So the ability for these communities to, first of all, be resilient, to survive, to get into contact with the emergency operations centers at each of the municipalities, and then from there communicate back to the National Emergency Operations Center, where a more national or regional approach and resources and humanitarian support can reach the targeted, victims or people impacted. That is how it will work. Now, everything is centered upon, first of all, the people surviving, creeping out
No,
of their
but you know
craft,
what I'm concerned
etc.
about, right?
Yeah.
Is people in political position holding things in their back pocket and restraining people like Marissa team on the ground,
They will do that, Gary,
right?
because the problem is that
So
the
what I'm looking
advisors,
at,
yeah, the
what I'm
advisors
looking at is
are
the
not good.
angle of
Yeah.
how do we facilitate them and not them leave them totally at the mercy.
But the good thing about it is that one of the most important things is you have to be very careful in terms of resource and funding applications, right? And no persons, this is the big problem we had with donor agencies. Huh? Your proposal has to be clearly, right? Very, very, well done in that. You have to make sure that you have to convince these people that they can't waste resources. And one of the things is that if there are existing systems that exist within a country, you should not have duplication or redundancy, right? You have
Yeah,
to
but
have,
yeah, no,
yeah,
I understand that point.
yeah,
But my point is those systems and those resources may not be released. We have seen that too many times
right. So it's a
to
whole of
and
government thing.
persons
Yeah,
again in political position fighting for control, dominating things based on their friends, family, and association while people are suffering and dying.
no, we're
Right?
not going to let that happen, Gary. What it is that from this conversation, clearly, and the last one, right? What we have to do with Marissa and her team is to have a national, right, a national program, and we need to outfit them with the necessary training, right? We have to teach them, right? We have to let them not just do courses in first responder and first responder training or community emergency response training and first aid training, etc. But we also need to train them in disaster risk management. So what it is that they begin to understand the strategic and very important programs that will allow them to act in a better way, right? To feed into the existing systems, no matter if the government are not supporting them, we need to strengthen them, and I think this is what they are asking for. So in
Well,
that
that's the
training,
objective here with me,
yeah,
because um, I sent them out to Central
yeah,
to do some coverage for MP Gosang, and instructions came from the mayor to shut them down. Right?
yeah,
So apparently Marissa was very strong, but I saw it, but I couldn't get someone of them on the phone at the time. But
yeah.
what I'm saying
See,
to you is,
yeah.
I expect
Ho-
persons within the structure and system
yeah.
and their egos to get in the way
Well,
of a team
yeah.
that's
So
very vigilant, very interested.
what I would like to suggest is it's very soon, and this can be done. This can be done via Zoom or via a virtual training, right? And I am happy to offer it. What we need to do is to develop a business plan, a strategic plan for the organization, right? And part of it is that they must understand the national response framework, right, of Trinidad and Tobago. Once they do that, they can understand how and what they have to do in order to get the approval of the mayor. Because one of the problems we're having is people are operating in silos, right? And what happens is that Marisana team is going to get the hard end of that bargain, because they are going to be looking as people who are coming in aggressively, who needs to correct the situation. So they're going to be making other people look bad. And anytime you make other people look bad, right, they are going to rebel. So what it is that there's a methodology that we have to use. I will let them know how it is done. What they have to do is using their politicians now, the MPs and the councillors, and any one of the MPs who are able to support their communities and their burgesses and their constituents, so that we can actually bring the key stakeholders involved and have a clear discussion as to what are the roles and responsibility of each one of those stakeholders. I am happy and I'll be willing to work with your partners, who will be able to possibly assist us in this regard. so that it doesn't look like it's coming from me alone and any other persons who might be able to get, some retired persons who worked with me at the ODPM, some retired disaster risk reduction people, some regional people who are happy to come on board in the Zoom platform. And what we can do is to explain and let them understand how they can begin, right, to enter into that whole scenario where they are not going to be getting the kickback from people like the mayors and all this sort of thing. So if we let them know how they can do that and who are the key people to bring on their side, so they can begin not just doing that,
But
but
they were
also being on
there.
the first
They were
unit
there upon the request that I had,
of
as
the
you remember,
MP.
the MP.
Right. So this is the problem, because you see, here is where it divides politics from the people who have the authority under the chief executive officer of the municipality. So this is what I'm trying to say. There, for example, you cannot go now into any one of the Ministry of Health centers and say, well, look, I want to do this. Right? There is a way it has to be done. Even if the MP is supporting you, and the MP who is a Minister of Health is going to be supporting you, doing it, remember, you have to deal with the people who are within the ministry, who runs the ministry, right? So the thing about it is that, remember, a lot of those people are PNM people. And I mean, I'm not saying the mayor is PNM. What I'm saying is a lot of the government public service, I mean, Sumant and I have been saying this from the longest while. Government agencies and government persons in the public service, quite a lot of them are PNM. So all they need to do is to whisper or advise or say that it can't and whatever, and right away you have problems. Even if the politicians might want to do it, right? The authority and the underflying service, the sequence by which certain things happen in the public service, which is very bureaucratic, it's not going to happen. Such as approval, for example, to use a drone, for example, you see. So approval to have an ambulance. You can't just have an ambulance. You have to have approval from the Department of Transport. You have to have a license to have it. You have to have trained paramedics who are certified, and there must be a whole registration process, right? And of course, you have to have certain things. And having an ambulance, it's not just going to buy a bus and putting in the right things and saying, okay, I have two NBs, parking it up at a community center and say, I have an ambulance. If anybody dies on that ambulance, right, they can be sued, because you have things like public liability issues, and so there are big issues. So right now, for me for resources to be applied, I need to teach the team not just the basics. I mean, that could be done by any one of the training agencies, CERT training, first responder training, all of that is fine. Those things can be done by persons who can do it. But what I need to do now is to teach them how they can manage disaster risk management within the community, so that it allows them to have a better interface, right, with private, public, and other civil agencies.
Stephen, from
Dr.
your
Amrup,
experience with government,
if I, Dr. Amrup, just remember, we will be holding you to that.
Yeah, I have no problem. We were getting a question from
working with you. Yes, and we'll be holding you to that. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just saying. So it seems as if, obviously, there's a lot of bureaucracy which is in the way, which has probably been there for many, many decades, and it's a way of doing things that has makes the wheels of government at various levels grind slowly. If a new politician, a new political team comes in at the head of the country, do they have an ability to try and thin out this thicket of regulations and things that are going to slow people down? Or is this something that we just have to live with?
The answer to that is yes, they do. And the reason, what they need to do, though, is they need to change the status quo. What happens is they come back and they do the same thing that the other government does. They bring in people to advise them and to provide the guidance, who are not qualified and competent to do so, who are politically brought in. So what you have is a repeat of the same problem that happened with the previous government, each with its own particular thing. So if you have an advisor, for example, to the Minister of Health, that's just say, right, who says that when he comes in, he looks at all the strategic imperatives, right, of that ministry. I'm saying that he has to apply the business process. Good. And he comes in and he says, well, okay, let's look at the strategic plan. Let us look at all the emergency operations plan. Let us look at the business continuity plans of the ministry and all it's from the primary, secondary, tertiary centers. You want to have the manifesto of the new government says, okay, they want to have a cardiac catheterization labs, right? So they want to save people with the heart attacks, yes? But if the advisor cannot identify that in order to save somebody with a heart attack, you have to bring in the damn person with the heart attack first. And if you have an ambulance system that has no paramedics and you don't have AED in the mall, then how could you get that guy from the mall there? He'll be dead before he arrives. You understand what I'm trying to say? So that what I'm saying is that the advisor has to have the understanding that he has to, even if he doesn't want to do it and is appointed there by the minister as a friend or whatever, and he served as a doctor for how many years, the point about it is that he has to have the understanding that he has to bring in a group of persons or a person who has the understanding of how to manage healthcare so that he can look and apply the business process in healthcare and improve the service. But if he comes in and does the same nonsense that the previous government does, then we are stuck where one government will stop what the other government is doing and a new government will come and do the same damn thing, and then we repeat it, and then we have people in 2026 when we introduce the ambulance system in 2001, 2002, right? And we were beginning to train paramedics. And 24 years later, we only have EMT basics on the ground.
Yeah,
I mean, so that's the problem.
As an outsider, which gives me advantages and disadvantages, of which I'm very aware. I mean, what strikes me is that probably getting a bureaucrat to sort out the bureaucracy is not going to be successful. You probably want somebody who has a lot of operational experience to say, this is what needs to happen, and then get the agreement of the senior government that this is what needs to happen. And then one then needs to turn to the bureaucrat and say, make this happen. What do we need to change and how do we need to change it? And incentivize them for that. Because if you start getting too deep into the weeds too quickly, nothing will happen.
We were achieving that. We were achieving that in between 2011, right, to 2016, as a national mitigation or more like a public safety organization. I had to transform the organization that I was in as a CEO from disaster management to almost like public safety, right? And that was what I was doing, changing the whole concept of disaster to public safety, where we were mitigating public safety issues, where we began talking to all the key ministers and the permanent secretaries to try to implement business continuity planning. And we were getting far. We even had the building codes at that time that we were actually, you know that we don't even have a national building code in Trinidad and Tobago? And we
correct.
So we don't have one. Right?
Correct.
So in other words, then what is happening is that if you don't have a national building code, things like zoning for flooding and things is non-existent. You don't have the code, you don't have the legislation. So we were actually getting somewhere, and we were actually convincing them to do something. But then they lost the elections. Of course, I became I just became a retired person, and that was it for 10 years. So in other words, I agree with you. I think that is what is needed. But what is needed is that we really have to meet with the current politicians somehow, and we have to explain that to them. And we have to say, well, look, yes, we don't mind you have certain politicians around who are advising you, fine, and you're going to go in a certain way. A year has passed. So maybe what you might want to do now is to listen to what we have to say, right? Get some subject matter experts to be like almost a strategic advisory team. Have some of you consultants and other persons sit with us and explain to them, okay, yes, there are certain political issues, certain political quick wins that you are looking for. Fine, we understand that. You want to win the next election, all over the world we have that. We have politicians who are going to be looking at the next election and they want to get some key wins. Fine. But there are certain things that have to build, right, in this country, using the resources and now the limited resources so that it begins to build a legacy. And this is where disaster risk management and mitigation is so, let me say, it is a disadvantage because you do not have quick wins, as you know. Mitigation programs take a while before they kick in. And politicians don't see the money that they are spending. And this is what we now, as disaster risk reduction specialists, we need to sort of balance it and take a loss somehow and say, okay, this is some of the quick wins that I think you will get, but this is what you will have to invest in.
So a question for you about the politicians, if I may. So it varies from country to country. In some countries, the main political party and the main opposition party, the actual politicians, fight each other politically, but they actually get on with each other, play golf with each other, and drink with each other. In other parts of the world at other times, they wouldn't be, they wouldn't pour a bucket of water over another member of the party, the opposite party, if they were on fire. I think the United States is a bit like that at the moment. So the question is, in Trinidad and Tobago, the senior, say I was to say the top 12 politicians in the country from all of the various parties, do they hate each other, or do they sort of play golf with each other and sort of get on with each other? Is there any way that we could get a national consensus, cross-party, of what needs to be done, and so therefore you don't have this stop-start when you, because inevitably people are going to come into power and go out of power. So what you need is a national consensus that goes 20 years ahead if necessary, and will say, can we get all of you to agree that this is something that we need to do and this is the way we need to approach it? Do you think there's a chance of that?
I mean, I don't know if anybody else would want to cut in, but I do think that the answer to that is yes. They do have they do have a good relationship with each other. They might, in Parliament, they might quarrel with each other and fight with each other, but when they are in the room having tea, they pretty much socialize with each other. I'm not sure if they play the golf together, but I know that they do meet and greet. And when they're in the Parliament, or when they're doing whatever they're doing, they will obviously have conflicts. The thing about it though is that the answer to that is, I think that we can get there is. The problem right now is because the biggest priorities that the government has now is crime and the economy, you see, and that is because that is factoring so much in what they are trying to do and recover in a sense, is that things like mitigation and disaster management is not playing a very big role in what they are interested in. They are interested in the flooding because that's a political issue to a large extent. So what we would probably want to do is to take that, because there are political issues and quick wins in that, and strengthen Marissa and her team, right, at the community level, and use them, right, as the key trigger, right, that the agency that is on the outskirts now, that could trigger a response from the organizations and the authorities, for example, under the local government legislation. You see, under the legislation, right, the Local Government Act, right, is giving the responsibility of the chief executive officer of the local government authority, right, to provide services for the burgesses. That is the fundamental law there. So what will happen is that Marissa is a community organization. They are not registered in the sense that they are a private company. They are not limited liability, etc., right? So what we have to do is, I'm just guessing, I'm not sure, but what I'm saying is that what they have to do now, they have to be an entity that is not just community and has authority, but they have to have some sort of liability, some limited liability. They have to be a company, right, whether you like it or not. So this allows them to. If
there was suitable legislation, could Marissa and her team be an adjunct to the local fire team, or an adjunct to the local hospital, or the police?
You see, it's not, and this is where, when we were there in 2011, we were asking the fire services we were asking the government at the time to begin to review the legislation that allowed community, like in the States, for example, you would have persons in the community who would be, auxiliary fire officers. so that your resources at the fire station would not be plenty, so that if indeed there's a fire, a lot of the community members who would have had ongoing training will assist, right? So we don't
Yeah.
have that here in Trinidad and Tobago. We have some Good Samaritan legislation which allows persons under precedents in law rather than the active legislation. There is precedents where persons have acted as Good Samaritans and people have died, etc., and they have gotten away with it because they have acted as a Good Samaritan. So under the legislation and like for precedent cases, if Marissa and them is trying to do an evacuation of flooding and somebody dies, right? There's some liability issues there. But under the current legislation, if they have a good lawyer and they go to fight this case in court and the person has a civil suit against them, if they're trying to resuscitate somebody and the person dies, the family can sue them. And if that happens,
Well,
right, that means that they would have to get good lawyers, and then they will probably win the case because they're acting under a Good
yeah,
Samaritan. But there's a lot of
that's one of the
funds that
things
will
where
have
the
to go.
government needs to structure it.
Yes.
That's where that should never go to a case against Marissa. It needs to be structured so that
Right.
that does not happen.
Right. So this is what
and if they want to sue somebody, then they sue the government.
Right. See, we have to prepare Marissa and her team in the sense that if they have, using the current legislation, knowing that the government wouldn't change it right away, we have to protect them. So if they form a limited liability company under the current CPO, like a Rotary Club, for example, we have gone and registered our Rotary Club. So right now I'm a Rotarian, but it's a company, a limited liability company. So under current legislation, if you're suing, you can't sue me, for example, under civil suit. You can't sue Marissa because she resuscitated the person. You actually have to have a lawsuit against the entire limited liability company. So there are certain things that we have to begin now to protect them as they go out now and they start to interact with people, you see? So we can begin to do all of that with the training sessions that I'm talking about. We can begin to prepare them, you see, so that they can be able to cover themselves in that time when we're trying to convince the politicians to change some of the, for example, our customs legislation is so rigid that even if we have a disaster in Trinidad and Tobago that we need outside help, do you know the problems that we'll have for you to send goods into Trinidad, for that goods to reach into Lordland or something? There are big issues.
There are issues like that with Jamaica.
That's what I'm saying. And it happens in a lot of these islands. And the problem is that because they have not amended the customs legislation, that is the problem. So we have to begin to change all of these things. And we started that damn thing in 2011 to 2016. So we actually got all the people on the table. We had the Ministry of Finance, we have the Comptroller of Customs, we're all on the table. We gave them draft legislation that they needed to amend because of the other disasters in the Caribbean. Other countries had the same problem, St. Lucia, whatever, right? They had to have the sunset type legislation. They had to have sunset legislation that a lot of these people had to enact to allow us to carry goods and things in Bahamas, in St. Lucia, in Dominica. We had big problems. So we do have quite a lot of
this. A lot of this does seem to be, from the political level, and I think it would be really interesting to sit down with at dinner with some of the top politicians and just hear what they have to say. When there's no recording, there's no newspaper or TV, and just hear what they have to say and see whether they're honest and how much they want to do it.
I can tell you one thing. I mean, what I'm telling you here, right, to be honest with you, is a conversation that would have to come out of the ODPM as we speak now, because they are the country's authority on what I'm talking about, disaster risk reduction, in terms of that that whole overall, legislative agenda, right? Because Ministry of Health they have nobody to do that, right? Because they are developing RHAs, right? Ministry of Health is right now dealing with chikungunya and people dying in hospitals and lawsuits and all kind of crazy. So in other words, then there is no entity, right, in Trinidad and Tobago besides the National Disaster Office that can bring somebody on the table and explain this all that we're talking about here, explaining to Marissa and CERT teams that they have to have vicarious liability because they must be part of the local government act, right? That is the local government legislation that protects them. You see,
That goes without
if
saying. I mean,
yeah,
they've got to have protection.
that's correct.
But it sounds as if there needs to be a wish list
Yes.
that needs to go in front of of not just this incoming government,
Yes.
but whoever the main opposition party is,
Yes.
and say, look, we need you to agree on this. What horse trading can we do to get this? I mean, we can build on, or you can build on the good work you've already done. Some things have changed, such as the things you can now do with drone. My partner here in Florida, I mean, she knows a lot about drones. She flies, I think it's a $40,000 drone that does infrared and all of the other, has LiDAR scanning, all of this stuff in disaster operations.
Yeah.
And they are a huge benefit.
Yeah.
And so the law needs to be changed so that that things like this can be used in 2026.
Definitely. What I'm suggesting is that the ODPM, right, which I'm sure you understand is like FEMA in the US, right? Yes. So the ODPM in Trinidad is like FEMA in the US. So they have to bring all the stakeholders on the table, yes? And they have to say, look, okay, we have some quick wins here, and we have some long-term and medium-term issues. Long-term will be legislative, right? But in short term, in terms of politics and quick wins and whatever, for Marissa and them, for community resilience, these are some of the things that we can do. We're talking about MOUs, MOAs, right? Training for Marissa and her team for drones, right? We need to bring the early warning system, right? System that we have currently in terms of communication, water meters, etc., right? All the whole early warning system team together and say, look, we need Marissa and them to be part of that, because they are going to be the team that will strengthen the early warning system. Good. We use
there is a team, but it sounds as if you need like 20 or 30 Marissas, each leading their own little teams around the place.
Yeah, when I'm speaking of Marissa, remember I did say that you have to have a national program, right? And you
another question for you, sir. How frustrated with the current situation is ODPM?
But I think part of the problem with ODPM was government policy. I mean, I know that when I left there were a few people who are still there. So which means that they understand the dogma, they understand the philosophy of what we were trying to do. But I think what happened is, because the government of the last 10 years, they had a strict policy that they had to abide to, is that they were more response-centric. Response-centric means that when you look at some of the signals that were coming out of that organization, they were actually more waiting for something to happen and responding, rather than putting a lot of programs and programming into mitigation and trying to mitigate the impact of the hazard, rather than just responding to the hazard. Once you see, for example, that the ODPM, right, was given 2 response vehicles, right? That is vehicles that were able to go out in a flood, right, to save people and help people. ODPM has no role in that. ODPM cannot do that because you have other persons to do that. You understand what I'm saying? So once you see that type of thing happening, you realize that the whole concept of operations of ODPM failed. And the reason for that, they're not a legislative entity. They are just a cabinet note. They are a division in the Ministry of National Security. They're not even a legal entity. You see? So unless they had any sort of teeth, whether the people who are there in the organization or the CEO of that or whoever it is, first of all, they were guided by national policy in disaster management, which put all the emphasis on the local government agencies to strengthen themselves and deal with the emergencies at the local level. What they did is they neglected the coordination and the national orchestration of disaster management by the ODPM, and they didn't continue the drive for the legislative agenda to make that organization a legal authority for disaster risk reduction, a national platform. So it's not a national platform. It can only beg people to help them, and it can only hope that the people come out to the meetings, and there's no official statement that says, look, if I asked you to do something, you should do it because it's part of the national interest, and because they just have no authority right now. So part of that problem that you're talking about there now is that they have no legal standing.
Right. So look, I'm probably going to have to go off soon, but I'm a white guy with a totally different accent, living in another country. I am immensely frustrated, even as an outsider, by the situation that you have to deal with over there. I can only imagine how frustrating it must be to be there and deal with all of this.
Boy, I am literally thinking about just staying here in Canada and not going back, to be honest with you. Yeah.
Well, Canada is a wonderful place, apart from the mosquitoes.
But Sam, I would like you to visit, go down for vacation, go fishing with Dr. Ramrup and Ken, and let's get a grass and physically see what's going on.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And we could probably, while you're there, introduce you to some of the politicians also. You know,
I'll be glad to host you, meet you, pick you up, and carry you around.
I did mention to the Prime Minister before the election, way ahead, that what I wanted to do, and did send information about you and your organization. So I just have to remind her, but at the same time, I want you to take a trip, link up with the guys down there, go on a vacation trip, you know, with these guys, and go fishing or whatever, and try to get a better physical grasp of things. So as soon as we can arrange that, I'd like to get that done.
And think how to use me, because I have strengths and weaknesses, but even my weaknesses could be turned into strengths. The fact that I'm the outsider, you can get me to say things that maybe you can't say if you're an insider who is there. So, I'm the guy who comes in and asks all the silly questions that maybe are a little bit awkward and embarrassing for some people, but somebody who has to live there each and every day, maybe they can't say those questions.
We'll find use for you. Don't worry. Definitely will use.
Obviously, I've had a little bit of experience as well, but have a think how best. I would love to do what I can do to try and help everybody. And the key thing to remember in all of this is that we're talking about disaster response, emergency response. We are talking about people's lives and livelihoods. This is not, discussing how we're going to do a new knitting pattern or changing toothpaste flavors. This is sorting out people's lives and livelihoods, often in very difficult circumstances. And if there is legislation that is in the way, it needs to get out of the way. If there are people who are bureaucrats who are just too comfortable with the way that it has been because they have not been personally affected, then we need new people in those positions. And ideally, we need to get the politicians to agree that this is something that is important, even though they may not see the full return in their term of office. But if we can get politicians to agree that, and I've worked with politicians in the USA on this, and they do get it. I think that there is huge potential for improvement. And even if you only get 50% improvement, those are lives that you will be saving that would otherwise have been lost.
Well, personally, I think my Prime Minister is very interested in improvement. And I think if we get her here, we can definitely get some support. She is definitely interested, based on my conversation with her, in setting up what I was thinking of doing. So, she's dealing with a lot right now. She's taking government, and the previous party did some serious damage financially to the country, and infrastructure-wise, a lot of things. They created so much chaos. So, even though she intends to get into some things, she can't even touch it right now because she's dealing with the unnecessary things that she shouldn't have dealt with. So these are some of the setbacks. But I just at least want to present the idea, let her know, well, listen, we are helping this end, while you're dealing that, all we need is your support. You know what I mean?
Well, it sounds good. And you certainly have my support. And I wish everybody well. And we'll just take this one step at a time and see what we can do to move this forward.
Thank you very much, Simon, for taking the time to join us. We will be talking to you on the phone going forward.
Okay,
And
Simon, that's you.
I just added you back to the disaster group. So you could be in line of conversation with the rest of the team here, and the politicians are in there. The key decision makers are in that group. You were there previously when Claudia Carrizales was there back in 18 and stuff like that. But anyway,
She was the MLO.
she was the colonel, part of the
Yeah, military liaison officer at the U.S. Embassy, right? Yeah.
yeah.
I remember.
Yeah. So Simon wasn't there in the group at that time, but we wasn't getting anywhere on the PNM. Anyway, so our government is in power, which I feel like I have a little chance of getting something done. And I know that for a fact that my prime minister showed some interest in what I was talking about. So I just want to get you into Trinidad, get a feel of what's going on there, meet with the guys physically, see what they're doing, and we'll take it from there. But we're going to be talking to you on the phone, and I'll keep you looping into the conversation because you're in the disaster back in the group there.
You know where to find me. All right.
Thank you very much.
Very peaceful, safe, and tranquil night.
I think Marissa wants to say something before you go. Go ahead.
Yes, Mr. Simon, I would like to thank you for your valuable feedback, your guidance on emergency preparedness and disaster protection. Your advice has given us so much clarity, and my team, thank you, and we are very, very grateful for sharing.
Thank you for what you are doing and for caring and for stepping up. One of the things that our recent head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency in the USA said is, in times past, we looked at the people on the street and in their homes as the problem to be solved. And whereas now we have to realize that they are a resource, that we need to be bringing them into the emergency response and disaster preparedness system. And there is a whole change of mindset that goes with that. And you are at the cutting edge of that. You're at the leading edge of that.
So thank you very much. Chan, you want to say anything before Simon leaves? Let's say a quick hello. I think she is. Go ahead, Chan. I don't know if she's been on here.
Miss Puri?
You're trying to unmute herself, I think. Oh, yeah.
All right, so here what?
She's here, so she's going to say something.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Mr. Simon, thank you very much. I can relate to some of the stuff that you're saying because I lived through Andrew as well. So at one point, so I understand the preparedness that we need to do, and we have a lot of work ahead of us. So
yes.
Thank you very much for guiding us. And Mr. Dalchan and Mr. Mahabir, I want to thank everybody. And Mr. Ramrup, thank you so much.
Where's Mr. Rajan? Where is he? Around somewhere?
Right here.
Okay, buddy. So just say a quick hello, and then we with Simon, and then we will.
Right. Well, thanks a lot, Simon. You've given us some new insights that we didn't think about, and of course, Dr. Ramrup is a wealth of knowledge on what's going on here in Trinidad and Tobago, and an immense resource for us. So we look forward to working with you guys to taking this thing to the next level and making it a success. Yeah. Have a good night, guys.
All right.
Ken, you want to say anything?
Well, I think we covered it there. We identified the gaps. We exploit the bureaucracy at certain levels, and we have to work together as a well-seasoned team. I think we'll become more productive. But I wanted to take that opportunity to show people what a 100-year storm is, right? It's next level. And those type of storms, we're talking about just bare survival. And we have to keep in mind that these storms are going to become a reality one day, right? And we have to prepare ourselves. And my focus is climate resilient designs at the community level to safeguard these communities because they are the first responders. If they get washed away, then everything goes. And it's a total disaster. So we have to build these communities. We have to implement designs that are climate resilient, that are viable, and will withstand the loading and the elements from some of these major storms. So as an engineer, that is my input, and that's what I bring to the team.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you
So,
so much.
Simon, we'll be in touch with you, okay?
Sounds
Have
good.
a good night, guys.
Thank you very much for having me along this evening.
Thanks,
It's
Simon.
been an
Thanks,
honor.
guys. Everyone, Dr. Amrup, take care. Gary.
Good night, everybody.
Okay, guys.
Thank you, Marissa. We'll be in touch.
Thank you. Good night.
So we're here in Madingo Road. Of course, we are doing a site visit to see the extent of this project and how far it has reached from since the commencement date. I know a lot of persons have been messaging, calling, and writing on different social media platforms with regards to the completion of this project. I know that the homeowners and the commuters that have to use this roadway and Murga Tableland, they want back this Madingo Road. I'm here to tell you this morning that the project would be completed. It is earmarked to finish by the second week in April, but the contractor is pushing for the 30th of March. So all being well, we would be finished by the 30th of March. I'm asking persons to just be a little patient with us. If you would look at what is happening here, we have some drainage to be completed to make sure that when the project is completed, that the road water does not further affect the houses, nor does it interfere back with the roadway. So that is what is being done right now. So if you look at the road, it is basically completed. We just have to do some compacting with some more sand, and of course then the asphalt comes in. So again, I want to thank commuters and the business community that I know things have been affected because we didn't have use of this roadway, and I know the different access route is not in the best condition, but I want to thank the neighbors, the villagers, and even the commuters for their patience, and the taxi association. I know not having this roadway would have put serious impact on person's pocket, but it was necessary. As I said, the government took a stance this time round to put things in place to make sure that we safeguard another home, because everyone knows that I would have lost 2 structures here, well, 3 structures actually, and I'm glad that the government took the stand to do this project in such a way that we safeguard a home and that we nearly have the project completed. I want to say thank you to the Minister of Works for making sure that we are still on time, and if you look at what is being done, the structural integrity of this project, I want to thank the Minister of Works and of course the engineers at Matilda office for making sure that they visit and things are proceeding. So this video is just to give you an update, the status of the project, and as I said, it should be completed by the end of March, but the contractor is saying second week in April, but we are pushing for the end of March.